What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Team Fish Knuckles YouTube channel. Now, last week I actually did a question and answer video with this young fellow right here, and he just, happened to do somewhat well regionals this past weekend. So how you doing today, James?
I'm doing okay. I had a pretty decent weekend.
I just thought
It was okay.
It's funny. Kevin was like, did you know James was gonna win? I was like, nope, but I'll take it.
Somehow figured it out. Somehow.
I just thought it was funny too, because at first when you watched the Q&A, you're like, all right, James is definitely playing dark. And then he does like a whole 180. He's like, all right, I'm gonna go, instead of aggressive, I'm gonna be passive and just like not attack.
Yep. Yep. I was on Evil Tall actually until the points bump, and then I switched over to Lapras because that's what I actually wanted to play. So.
All right, so I guess you kind of answered already, but why did you decide to play Lapras? You know they have the world's point now. Yeah, I guess the world's point increase from regionals and league cups stuff like that. But why did you decide to play this Lapras deck?
So basically, I had been testing it off and on since it started posting up results in Europe, and I really liked the deck because it reminds me of a lot of the older like 2005-ish decks, like Metacham EX and things like that. And anything that takes me back in the day, I love playing with. And I had gone ahead and done testing with it, and I liked it, but I wasn't sure about a lot of its matchups because you can get overwhelmed by Turbo Darkrai. You can just lose super hard or on like turn 2 to Decidueye if they go like turn 1 Vileplume and then like turn 2 attack with a Decidueye. You just KO your Lapras because you couldn't put down a Fury Belt.
True.
But it's the deck that I enjoyed the most. Every time that I would test with it, I just had the most fun playing it. And I was going to play Darkrai or Evil Tall up until they changed the points for Worlds. I was at 303 points before it, and then I was at 403 after the bump. So, yeah, I gained 100 points from the bump, got 80 from regionals and 20 from League Cups, and I was like, well, now I don't have to go with as safe a choice because I can just like win 2 League Cups in the last part of the season and get my slide into Worlds. But so I was like, I'm just gonna play the deck I want to play. I think it's a good call, and turns out it was all right.
Just a little bit of a good call for the weekend.
Yep.
All right, so going to day number 1, I know you said you want to play the deck, but are you nervous at all playing it? Or are you more excited to play it for this weekend going into day 1?
I was super excited. Like I was just excited that I filled out the deck list. I was ready to go. I didn't bring all the cards with me though. I brought Evil Tall sleeved up, and at 4 a.m. I was putting together the final list and making a couple changes, and I realized that I didn't have any Team Flare Grunts on me, and I didn't have a Team Rocket's Handiwork. I've never owned one in real life, so I had to buy them from the vendor at literally at like 8:30 in the morning on day 1, and then as soon as I bought them, I was like, all right, I'm ready to go. Let's do this. I posted a status on Facebook, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna play some trainer cards this weekend.
Did you actually have Stevens on you at the time, or did you have to get those for somebody too?
Oh, I always have Steven on me. Like that card. I've been carrying one of those with me all season.
In your wallet, you're like, all right, ready to go. Whenever Stevens, let's go. Just play your wallet. All right, we're good to go, guys.
Yep.
All right, so what happened day 1? How did it go? What were your matches like? Were they scary? All that kind of good stuff.
So day 1, round 1, I played against Volcanion, which historically has been a bad matchup for Lapras. And what truly sold me on playing the deck for the weekend was Thursday night. I was trying to figure out because a lot of the Lapras lists that I had seen and everything had trouble with Volcanion and with Mewtwo, because Volcanion can just one-shot you if you don't get enough energy down quick enough, and Mewtwo can just load up a bunch of energies even through the energy denial and then one-shot a Lapras. And I came up with a plan against both decks, and the plan versus Volcanion was basically that they go through so many cards between just the way the deck is built with all the trainer mails and max elixirs and everything, that they can't afford to be swinging into you with a baby Volcanion. So once they power heater and load up their board, they're going to have to send up a Volcanion EX and attack you first with a Volcanion EX. And so what I would do is I would just have a water energy on an active Lapras, and I'd just collect with that one and load up benched ones. And they would bring up a Volcanion and knock out my Lapras, and I would send up the next one, and I would Hex, and I would Ice Beam to knock out the Volcanion to go to 4 prizes. And I'd be able to do that because Steven would just search out the Hex so that I'm ready to go whenever it's time to rumble. And I'd Ice Beam that, and then once you Hex the Volcanion, they're down to 3 total Volcanions left in the deck because they typically don't play any kind of recursion like Super Rod or anything.
True.
And so they can't take a knockout on the fresh Lapras because they max out at 140 under a Hex. So they do whatever. Usually they would send up a baby Volcanion, and if they either didn't send up a baby Volcanion at that point, or they like hit you with 140 with the Volcanion, you could just Blizzard Burn the Volcanion EX or Lysandre and Blizzard Burn to go to 2 prizes. So then you're up in the prize exchange, and then all you need to do is Blizzard Burn anything. So if they ever take a KO again with an EX, you just win because you send up another Lapras and Blizzard Burn. So I just did that 2 times round 1, and that was my plan against Volcanion, and it happened flawlessly. So round 2, I played against the Lapras Mirror. He started with a basic, and then I mulligan, and he was like, well, this is going to be interesting. And I mulled 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And then he flips over Lapras, and I'm like, all right, then. So I was like sitting down, and I was ready to just go to time. We were going to be, I was in my mind, I was like, it's going to be game 1. We're going to be in time. No one's taken a prize yet. Like, that was like the scenario I had in my mind. But what ended up happening is we ended up like taking each other's energies for a while, and then I went ahead and started it. I was able to get the first Lapras with 3 energies, and I was able to just start attacking while still disrupting him. And I was able to actually win the match fairly quickly. I know I went up to some of my friends, and they were like, oh, did you lose because you like won fairly quickly? And I was like, no, I beat the Lapras Mirror in like 30 minutes, 2-0. And they were like, what? How does that even work? But I don't know how it happened so quickly. But and they weren't even like particularly bad games. Like, we both drew cards and did things, but I just ended up getting there.
It's just your day.
Yeah, it definitely was. I know a lot of people kept asking me how many crushing hammers I ended up flipping on the day, but I only flipped 11 heads day 1. Yeah, day 1 I only flipped 11 heads out of like 20-something hammers, and then day 2 there were a couple matches where my hammers were definitely a little sided towards me, but
that's all it takes sometimes.
Yeah, that's all it takes sometimes. So I beat the Lapras Mirror. Round 3 I played against Mega Mewtwo. And I went ahead and was able to. What ended up happening in that matchup, and what I had in my mind, was you just do the same thing. You have a single Lapras with a Lapras with a single energy up front, and then you load up the benched ones, and you never put 3 on them. You just load everything up to 2 so that you can attach to do the 3rd attack. But that way they never get that extra 30 on you, even if they Lysandre one of your benched ones. And so I would just stop attaching after I had 2 benched Lapras with 2 energy and 1 up front with a single. And I would just disrupt their energy and always force them to attack first, because that's my favorite thing about the deck is typically they always have to make the first move and then you get to react, because you're disrupting them so much that they have to eventually start moving in, or they're just going to mill themselves out because of Sycamore and everything.
That's true.
So I just denied the energy off the bench, and then they load up a Mega Mewtwo, and I Ice Beam it, and if they don't have some kind of switch card, then I Blizzard Burn it to take like 4 energies off the board, and then I'm usually able to just run them out of energy after that. And that's what happened that game. Won that 2-0. Round 4, I played against my friend Dalen Dockery. He was playing Decidueye Vileplume. Game 1, we went back and forth for a little while, but I eventually ran him out of energy and got that game. And then Game 2, he didn't have nearly as good a setup, and he ended up conceding that game because I got too far ahead. Round 5, I got paired against the Giratina Garbodor Tauros deck that a lot of people were playing.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes. And I felt kind of bad because that was my first top of the year was with Giratina Garbodor, so I love that deck.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it actually was a pretty good play for this weekend, which is also like another like thing in my mind where I wanted to play Lapras because I was thinking maybe people would want to play Giratina. And I hit somebody who was, and he when we sat down, he was like, "How did I get paired against you out of all the 4-0s?" And I was like, "I don't know."
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, exactly. So, unfortunately, he didn't get to do too much because he only ran, I think, 8 energy, and they were just 4 double dragons and 4 double colorless, and I was just able to take them all away. So I won that 2-0. And at this point, I commented to one of my friends because I was 10-0 in games. I was 5-0 and 10-0 in games. I hadn't dropped a single game all day. And I was like, I'm just feeling it. Like, this is a good day. Round 6, I get paired against Gyarados. And that matchup I wasn't as prepared for, especially at 5-0. The deck is very good, like I was talking about in the Q&A video, but I just thought that he would have played against more Decidueye by this point, and that would have done him in. But we played game 1, and I believe he ended up getting me game 1. It might have been game 2, but he got me in a game. We just went back and forth. I think it was game 2 because game 1 he had 1 Magikarp prized, and I just kind of every time he would hit me, he couldn't one-shot a Lapras, so I would just switch out and then Rough Seas it down. And I would end up winning the Stadium War, even though I had to play Rough Seas first because I usually have more access to my puzzles than Gyarados does, just from drawing so many cards with Collect.
True.
And so I was able to win that match 2-1. Round 7, I played against Yveltal Garbodor, and that matchup is also fairly favored from all my testing that I did, just because you can run them out of energy pretty easily as well. However, game 1 was super, super close, and I was not expecting it to be. Like, I felt like I was just in the driver's seat for so long, and then he ended up, like, I missed a couple, like, turns of attaching energy mid-game, and he ended up catching up and got this big Yveltal going, and he ended up going down to 1 prize that game, and that one was really, really close. I ended up ice beaming him for 100 with a Lapras that didn't have a Fury Belt, and so that I could get him to use the Pokemon Center Lady in his discard pile for turn because I didn't want him to end me or anything. Mm-hmm. And so I held back the Fury Belt so that he wouldn't know that I had it, and so it was an Yveltal with a Fury Belt, so I did 100 to it and paralyzed it, got him to versus Seeker back Pokemon Center Lady to heal it down to 40, and then I got to play a Fury Belt and then Blizzard Burn for the exact knockout on the Yveltal.
There you go.
And so that was really cool. Round 8, I got to play against Israel Sosa, and that was a really, really good series of games. That was probably my favorite match of the weekend, honestly. It was just really good, really back and forth. Game 1, I got super, super lucky. This is in day 1 where Crushing Hammer ended up being pretty good. We both got down to low prizes, but his board is insane. He just had a bunch of energy still, but he's slowly running out of switch cards. And I ended up being able to. I noticed that I wasn't going to win the game through prizes. That I was going to have to lock something active if I was going to win. And all of his energy that I believe he played 12 dark energy. They were all either on the board or in the discard pile. So I noticed that I wasn't going to be able to win through prizes, so I just collected instead of Blizzard Burning to take a knockout to go down to 2 prizes. Mm-hmm. and I collected so that I would get to search for a puzzle, and I ended up hitting the double puzzle so that I was able to get 2 crushing hammers back, and I ended up hitting both of them in a ridiculous fashion to take away 2 energies from his Darkrai and Flare Grunt at the next turn to remove all 3 energies, and then it got stuck there, and he ended up milling out game 1. Game 2 and 3, my hammers definitely were done after that point. They ran out of gas. I don't think I think I hit those 2 heads, but I had missed 3 in game 1, and then I missed the rest of the hammers the rest of the match. And I was like, see, karma is like, that's karma, because I hit those important 2 that game, but then I couldn't figure it out the rest of the game. So I ended up losing that one 2-1. And then round 9, I played my first stream game, and that was against Daniel Altavilla. And that was the game that my deck decided to not show up. I started Wobbuffet game 1, and I end into nothing, and then he end, and I drew nothing, and then I played an in, and I drew nothing, and then he end, and I still drew nothing. And so I literally didn't do anything other than play 2 ends for like the first 3 turns of the game with a Wobbuffet active. So I couldn't even like attach energies or do anything. So he ended up winning that one somehow. And then game 2, he just got a way faster start than what I was able to deal with, and so he ended up taking it 2-0. And that was my day 1. Ended up 7-2, started off 7-0, and then lost the last 2 to Darkrai.
But still, going 7-2 is like fantastic. Like, you got to be feeling great, right?
Yep, yeah, I was feeling good. I was a little frustrated that that I lost that last one because I was just so used to like this deck being so consistent, because if you start Lapras and an energy, you get to do something always.
True.
And I was a little frustrated at that point about that, but I quickly got over that after getting some food finally, and I was good.
Now, going into that night, were you thinking about Darkrai? Were you scared of it more, or do you just think, oh, I just had bad luck kind of thing?
I was scared of it more. I realized I had always played the deck with a Kukui, and I didn't play Kukui at the regional. I ended up cutting it for the second Hex, because I kept getting angry that I was losing to the Decidueye Vileplume when I couldn't Steven for Hex if it got prized. So I expected more Decidueye than Darkrai. So I was like, even if my Darkrai match is worse because I don't have a Kukui, I'm going to make the choice that I play the second Hex so that I always have access to at least one.
True.
And that definitely played a role both day 1 and day 2. It was great that I had double Hex. But I kind of caught the end of that decision on those last 2 rounds where I did not have access to be able to one-shot a Darkrai without a Fury Belt.
Okay. And looking at top 32, was there anything like scary besides Darkrai you didn't want to play, or did you feel confident against everything else?
When I looked at the top 32, I didn't want to play against Mega Ray.
True, yeah.
I was lucky enough to not play against Mega Ray the entire weekend. Did not get paired against it once, and that was super helpful because I do not like that matchup.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was Mega Ray and Darkrai, and I felt like there was like a fair amount of Darkrai, but not too much in the top 32. I think there were more Mega Ray actually in top 32 if I remember correctly, and I just didn't want to play against either because I felt so sad about my Darkrai matchup after not having the Kukui, because the first time I Stevened and couldn't get a Kukui in that matchup, I was like, I'm really feeling this now.
Yeah. All right, so going to day number 2, what happened?
Day 2, I'd gotten some actual sleep for this time, so I was feeling better than day 1. I played against Evil Tall Garbodor round 1, and I was like, okay, cool, we can do this. Ended up really nice guy. I ended up playing 2 games, ended up running him out of energy both games. He had some bad prizes game 2, I remember. He prized 2 Evil Talls and something else important. I can't remember what, but so that was rough for him. Round 11, I played against Igor Costa, and I go to sit down, and I'm kind of dreading it because I played against Igor before, and I know how good he is and everything. And I was like, if anybody's gonna beat me with the Decidueye, it's probably gonna be him. And but he ends up offering the intentional draw, and I had to sit there for a second and think about it because it was early in the day, and we talked about it, and we thought at this point that the way things were going to shake out was that 30 was going to be fairly safe as far as match points to get into top 8. It ended up not being that case, but at this point we thought that that might be fine. And so I thought about it some, and I wasn't sure which version he was on, whether it was the Rainbow Energies or the Grass Energies, so I didn't have that information to think about as well. But me and Igor were friends and everything, and I trusted his judgment, and I definitely thought myself that we could get in with 30 points. And so we ended up taking the intentional draw that round to help us both. And then round 12, I saw that I got paired against Darkrai. And I was like, so this is where everything goes wrong. And so I saw that and I was like, how am I going to win? I thought about it all night. I was like trying to come up with different plays that I can do where I don't have access to, with Kukui, to KO a Darkrai. And I did not feel confident, but he ended up flipping over a Giratina. And I was like, suddenly it was like this wave of like relief comes over me. And he's like, yeah, not the optimal starter against you. And I was like, yeah, probably not. So he was actually on Darkrai Dragons with several Salamence, which do nothing against my deck.
Yeah.
So that version of Darkrai I feel much more confident in. Because they run less Dark Energy and more Double Dragons, and they just run more cards that don't interact with me.
True.
So I ended up taking game 1, and then game 2, I felt so bad because I hit so many crushing hammerheads that game. Like, I think I hit 4 or 5 heads. It was just like, I kept apologizing as I flipped the die. Like, I was just like, I'm sorry. And then he eventually ended up decking out, and so I got that. So at this point, I'm at 28 points, and Igor also won, and so we were like, sweet, we're probably going to be able to double draw in. But then, so round 13, I played against Daniel Altavilla again, and he was already in entirely, and I believe it's kind of in his favor to, like, get me into top 8 because of how he crushed me yesterday.
Sure.
He's probably like, if he ends up getting paired against me in the top cut, it's probably going to go his way from his point of view, and mine at that point. So he ended up offering the intentional draw, so I took it. And then my friend Connor Fenton he showed up, and we did the math on if 30 points was going to be safe to see if I could intentionally draw my last round of Swiss. And we figured out that it was not going to be safe at all. And at this point, I'm like, the entire plan is shot. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just hoping that I get paired again. There was an Eviltal, Jamie DePamplis. There was an Eviltal player, and I was like, all right, give me the Eviltal player. I've beaten it twice this tournament. Maybe I can do it again. Even though I know he's good and everything, I wanted to have like a matchup that I felt really confident in that last round if I was going to have to play it. So pairings go up, and I'm against my friend Alex Hill, and he's playing Decidueye Vileplume, and I'm like, it was him and Aaron Tarbell and Igor Costa were like the 3 Decidueye players I didn't want to play against. And so we did the math, and he's always been really good with like the math of like what match points get in and everything. Like, he's always the go-to guy for that. So he did that, and we realized that we weren't safe with a draw, so we ended up playing. I won the die roll and ended up going first. I got a pretty good setup on turn 1, and then he ended up whiffing Vileplume on turn 2. So I ended up with several turns of items. And I ended up running him out of energy slowly that game as well. So at this point, I'm 1 game away, and he ends up going first, and he whips the turn 1 Vileplume again. And at this point, I'm like, all right, we can do this. And I set up my board a little bit. I think I Skylaed for a Nest Ball to get Lapras and everything. And Then I think he whipped Vileplume. No, he got Vileplume on turn 2, but he didn't have a Decidueye yet. And he had discarded a Decidueye to a Sycamore earlier on turn 1. So he has Vileplume at this point, and I'm sitting here and I have a Wobbuffet on my bench, and I'm like, well, I can send this active and I can play my items and I can set up a little bit more, maybe disrupt some of his energy, but I don't want to give him access to items. Like, I don't want to give him access to items and turn off his Vileplume because he's not fully set up either.
True.
So I just started collecting, and I was like, well, I'll just collect my way into whatever board I want, and then I'll send up Vileplume, and we'll see if he gets set up. Because he actually had a possibility for the turn 2 win, because that's right, game 2 I only had Lapras, and so he had attached a double colorless to his Rowlet turn 1. So if he would have been able to retreat, he retreated to a Shaman. So if he would have been able to draw into Floatstone and the stuff for a Decidueye and a Grass, he could have one-shot my Lapras on turn 1. And so after that didn't happen, and after he set up that board with just a Dartrix on the bench and a Vileplume, after discarding a Decidueye, I was feeling pretty good. He kept Sycamoring and drawing cards, and he was Sky returning a lot with Shaman and drawing a couple cards each time. And he could never find a Decidueye. Like, I didn't understand what was happening. So, because I was like, he plays them, he didn't sideboard them out. You can't do that in this game. So I was like, they're somewhere the Big Owl is. And I ended up being able to take his energy away and start KOing things, and I ended up bringing up Lysandering that Dartrix that sat there for 5 turns without evolving, and it had a Grass and a double colorless, and I knocked it out. And at that point, he ended up conceding because he had 1 Decidueye left in deck because the other 2 were prized, and where I never sent up Wob, he couldn't Revitalizer for the other one. So for whatever reason, he just couldn't find that 1 Decidueye when he was drawing. Luck of the draw. And I ended up getting there and making top 8.
There you go. All right. So looking at top 8, you kind of know what everybody's playing by now. All right, these 7 people, I know what they're playing. Who's the one guy you don't want to play at a top? Or is there multiple guys? I don't know. Is there anybody you didn't want to play? I mean, you talked about Danny. He already had it in there. Top 8. Was there somebody else in there maybe?
I wasn't excited to play against Aaron Tarbell. But I knew that matchup, I had beaten Decidueye twice now in the tournament, and I felt confident in that matchup. So I thought that matchup could go either way, and he's a good friend, and I didn't want to play against him. But other than that, I felt dead to Danny Altavilla. I just felt he was my arch nemesis in the tournament. And because he just, both from me drawing bad, but also just the matchup is just, it's not unwinnable, but it's not in my favor. And I just did not want to play against that. But other than that, I felt the field looked pretty good for me to make a run for it. But I had noticed that if I won my top 8 match, I was going to have to play against Danny if he won his top 8 match in top 4. So I was like, ugh. So in the back of my mind, he was playing against Cena in his Mewtwo deck, and I was like, I hope Cena just gets every energy ever on a Mewtwo and goes to town. But from what I understand, both games they played took less than 15 minutes, and Danny ended up winning. So
yeah. All right. So what happened to top 8? Was it exciting? Was it close?
Top 8, I played against my good friend Austin Vance, and he was playing Mewtwo no Garbodor. And game 1, I was able to kind of just do that same thing that I did to the earlier Mewtwo matchup, where I started picking off his energies and didn't commit anything to the front or go aggressive. And he ended up making a push with a Mewtwo with a Psychic and a double colorless, and I was able to switch into my Lapras and Ice Beam it. He wasn't able to respond with a switch card of any kind, and then I was able to KO that Mewtwo. And he had kind of gotten a slow start where he didn't have any supporters, but he was still doing things, he was attaching energies and evolving into Mega Mewtwo's. So it wasn't the worst start, but it also was not optimal for him either. But he ended up drawing a Sycamore at some point and going through his deck. And But after I took out that Mewtwo, I was able to. He had attached a Float Stone to a Mewtwo earlier in the game, and I was able to end up Lysandering that at the end and KOing it with Blizzard Burn for the knockout. Because we ended up getting to this tight racing situation where I was not going to be able to run him out of energy that game. He just had too much going for him after he got set up. And so I Lysandered a Shaman at one point, and Blizzard Burn for the knockout, and he ended me to 2, and I ended up drawing the Versus Seeker to bring up that Mewtwo at the end and KO that as well. And then I won my top 8 match against him. Game two, I ended up delinquenting him to 0, and he top decked Shaman. And I just looked up at the sky, and I was like, "Why delinquent? Why?" Like one time.
I mean, but that's what delinquent does in her picture. She's literally like hand out, looking up like this.
Yeah, and I was just, I felt like delinquent. I was like, why do you do this to me? Like, take away all of his cards. Make it easy for me. But game 2 was pretty good as well, but I ended up kind of just doing the same thing and ended up, it got closer towards the end. He ended up running out of cards eventually because I thought he was going to run out of cards. And he had 2 cards in his deck, and he drew to 1. And I had Steven for Team Rocket's Handiwork the turn before so that I could try and mill him out on the next turn. But the card that he drew, I think it was the card that he drew, but it might have been just in his hand and he was waiting, was Super Rod. So then he Super Rod 3 Psychic Energies back, and I was like, I don't know now. Because I think he Super Rodded 3 Psychic Energies back and end or something. And so then the Rocket's Handiwork wasn't going to kill him at that point. So I was like, all right, it was kind of the same moment against Israel Sosa earlier where I was like, all right, I'm going to have to get some hammer luck to try and win now. So I sent up a Lapras. I retreated a Lapras just so it wouldn't have energy on it anymore because I knew I wasn't winning through attacking, so I didn't need the extra energy. I just needed to collect energy. So I retreated one just to get 2 energy off of it so that Mewtwo did less damage. And then I ended up drawing and then double puzzling the next turn for double Crushing Hammer, or a Crushing Hammer and Enhanced, and I ended up hitting the Crushing Hammer, Enhanced Hammering a DCE, and Flare Grunting in the same turn.
Jeez.
And so that left his Mewtwo with 1 Psychic Energy, so he drew for turn and attached a Psychic and attacked to KO the Lapras to go down to 2 prizes. I sent up Wobbuffet, and I drew and I Flare Grunted, and he drew, and he was out of DCEs at this point. So if I ever got him in a situation where the Mewtwo didn't have a single energy on it, then I was going to win because he could never double attach and he was going to end up decking out. And so he drew and like looked at everything and then passed, and then I just Versus Secret Flare Grunt and got the Mewtwo down to 0 energy on the active, and then he ended up milling out before he could do anything.
All right. So going to top 4, when did you find out like who you're playing against? Was it after or during your game that you found out who won?
It was during, and I was just like, after I like realized that I was gonna beat Austin in top 8, I was like, I felt really bad because I did not want to knock him out of the tournament, but I also like I'm there to win as well, but I found out it was gonna be Danny Altavilla in the top 4, and I was just like, oh, well, I mean, I guess a grand and a top 4 finish is pretty good. Like, I had locked up my Worlds invite at this point because I had gotten over 100 points from top 4ing, so I was like, all right, this is fine. Like, we qualified for Worlds off this tournament. We made a little bit of money. It's been a good run, Lapras. We've done okay. And there was a little bit of wait time, and I was just standing there thinking, and I was like, all right, it's all over. But...
All right, so what ended up happening?
Well, we sit down, and before the match, somebody mentioned Steven. One of the judges was talking about how I was playing Steven, and he ended up saying that he didn't know that I played Steven, and I was like, yeah, because I didn't play any cards in our previous game. He was like,
oh, yeah.
Because he didn't get to really know a lot about my deck because I didn't do a whole lot of things in our previous game. And someone was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mention that to give away information. And I was like, no, it's fine. And he was like, it's fine. If he has Steven in his deck, I'm probably advantaged anyway. And I said, yeah, a lot of people have thought that this weekend. And and so then I ended up mulliganing, and I had a Steven in my hand anyway, and so he was like, "See, it doesn't matter." Uh, and so we set up, and I'm going first, so I was like, "All right, well, that's step number one." And I ended up doing the same kind of strategy against that I do against the Mewtwo, where I just sit behind a Lapras and then just pick a turn where I'm gonna make an Ice Beam play and try and run him out of switch cards. And ended up getting into a racing situation where he kept Oblivion Winging because I kept trying to remove his energy, just to kind of not to try and remove his energy, but just to force him to keep using Oblivion Wing rather than sending up somebody in Dark Pulsing.
True.
And ended up I ended up knocking out 2 Oblivion Wing Eviltolls in a row with Blizzard Burn, and to go down to 4 prizes. He sent up a Darkrai and Dark Pulse. I Ice Beamed, and then he Escape Roped. I Lysandered it up, and then Blizzard Burned for the knockout to go to 2 prizes. He KO'd my Lapras, and then now it got kind of dicey because he ended me. Because I was ready to go with the Lysander the next turn. I had a Versus Seeker, and I was ready to just like bring up a Shaman and end it. And I was like, yes, we're going to get there. We're going to beat Darkrai. But I drew super dead off of the end. Like, I didn't expect to hit the Seeker after he ended me to 2, but I expected to hit something, and I didn't. And so I didn't really have anything to do, and I had to collect. And then he ended me again, and then I still drew nothing. And so he ended up like amassing enough Dark Pulses through me like passing turns to go ahead and take that game. And then so after that game, I was like, all right, well, it's been a good run, Lapras. We top forward with Steven in our deck, so it's been a good day. And I was just ready to lose, but at the same time, like there was this like little voice in my head, and it was like, all right, just do it. Like, just win. Just you can do it. And so game 2, he ends up. I went first and did my thing, and he goes second, and he plays a million max elixirs on turn 1, and goes through a bunch of cards in his deck, and then plays a Reverse Valley to counter the Rough Seas that I played on turn 1, and goes ahead and Oblivion Wings, I believe, and then I draw and I Delinquent to not take out the Reverse Valley, and it also took out the other 3 cards in his hand. So he's on nothing at this point, and I'm like, all right, give me a few turns, and let's see if I can get this figured out. So I went ahead and attached to my Lapras, and I was like, if I can KO this Oblivion Wing before he draws another supporter, even if he draws a supporter after that, I think that the game will have progressed enough to where I can take it. And that's exactly what happened. He ended up not drawing a supporter for another 2 turns, and then he drew an in and was able to get back in the game and draw cards. But at that point, I had amassed an energy a turn to everything, because that was kind of how my deck was built, was just make sure that you attach an energy every turn. That's why I played Steven. Like, I just always felt as long as I was attaching an energy every single turn of the game that I felt fairly advantaged against almost anything in the game. And so I ended up taking that game, and we go into game 3, and I'm worried because I don't know how much time is left. And with Darkrai being so fast, like, I know that I can take a prize really fast with Ice Beam and Blizzard Burn, but at the same time, like, Darkrai can just explode.
True.
So, and he's going first, so I'm just like, I'll be an energy behind, basically, or 5 energies behind, depending depending on how Darkrai draws. Like, you never know. You're either going to be 1 or 5 energies behind.
That's true.
So I ended up mulliganing 5 or 6 times at this point, which was the most that I... Like, the deck is supposed to mulligan a few times, but at the same time, like, 6 is a lot. Like... And I was like, of course, when he's going first in the top 4 against the matchup I don't want to play, that's when I'm going to mulligan the most times.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ended up drawing 5 or 6 extra cards at the beginning of the game. And he goes first, and he draws for turn, and he just, like, lays down 4 max elixirs all at once. And so he just plays them all, and he ended up hitting 3 of them. So I was down 4 energy going into my turn, but at the same time, like, at this point, because I had won that previous game, I wasn't thinking that I was going to lose anymore. I was just like, that's okay. We're still going to do this. And because he had a Darkrai active instead of Oblivion Wing, and he attached a Fury Belt to it. So it couldn't be float stoned. It would have to be escape roped if he was going to get it out of there. So I drew and I attached for turn and I flare grunted the energy off of it and I collected. And I slowly started setting up my board and he escape roped, but I Lysandred it the next turn to bring it back up and it didn't have an energy on it still. So I collected and then he had to burn his second escape rope the next turn to get it back out. And I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere. Like, he doesn't have two, like, after that point, he had 5 or 6 energy total on the board, and he had gone through so many cards. He had shamaned severally 3 times, I think. And at one point, on the second time that he escape roped, I sent up a Wobbuffet, and he ended up playing a shaman, and so he wasn't able to draw anything off of the third one. But there was another, like a shaman just sitting there on the bench. And so we end up going back and forth, and it gets super, super grindy. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, because he had gone through so many cards, he had drawn so many at the beginning, and then sycamored them away, and then he had trainers mailed and played all of his elixirs and everything. And I was like, all right, well, we're gonna mill him this game, and that's how we're gonna make our way to top 2. And I kept delinquenting him. I would like play my own Rough Seas. I would Rough Seas to heal my guys, and then I would delinquent, and then I'd play Rough Seas and heal my guys. Just like I would get to double heal my guys and take 3 cards away from the game. And I just kept denying him prizes. And every time he would hit a Lapras, I would just switch into another Lapras. I played all 4 Lapras on the board that game just so I could rotate them. And I just kept rotating them and kept Rough Seasing and just I was fighting for my life and just making sure I was like in the zone. And at one point, he ended up getting into a situation where he basically had to end every turn to not deck out, and that's not a good position to be in. So I just ended up. I kept Stevening and Skyling for Handiwork, and he kept inning because he couldn't allow for me to play the Handiwork. Because once I play the Handiwork, even if the first one's like double tails or something, it's there for me to versus Seeker and puzzle back always. So he kept trying to put it back in my deck, and eventually it got to a point where he had 2 cards in deck, and I had Handiwork, and I just went ahead and played it down, and I was like, all right, let's do it. And I flipped, and it was tails. And I was like, I hit it on the table, flipped it, and it was heads, and I milled him out. And the rush of relief, like beating Darkrai without the Kukui, like having to mill them several times, like it was so exhilarating at this point. And then I found out that Grant had beaten Aaron in top 4, and me and Grant had talked about it, and the matchup is just like it's so easy for Lapras.
It's not even a matchup, yeah.
Yeah, it's not fair at all. And while I really, really love playing close games of Pokemon, and I really, really didn't want my first regionals win to just be free in the finals, I'll take it. And so me and Grant ended up playing in the finals and ended up there's just nothing he can do. I felt so bad. Like, I kept every turn, I was just like, I'm sorry, take all your energy away. I'm sorry, take all your energy away.
And, for those who don't know, Grant played like a quad Wobbuffet deck, and like that was pretty much it. Like, that was the gist of his deck.
Yeah. And the problem was, at one point, like, I felt bad, and I didn't mean for this to come off bad at all, because I had talked with Grant and met him at this tournament and stuff previously, because he had told several people that he did not want to play against me because of the matchup. And I felt really bad because I felt like his deck was genius. Like, his deck was so good, like, so impressive. And it just had such good matchups across everything except for, like, something random like Lapras.
Yep.
And I commented to him, I was like, I seriously love your deck. I'm sorry that I'm doing this to it. Like, and So both games, he basically wasn't able to do anything, and he tried to bubble with Dewpider a lot towards the end. But with a rough season play and not able to get out of there, it wasn't going to get anywhere. And eventually, I drew the switch card to get out of the paralysis.
It was funny. You had like the Olympia in hand the whole time, but you didn't have the water energy. We're just like waiting. We're like, all right, where's the energy? Like,
Yep.
you got it, energy Olympia knockout.
Yep. And I was like, I'm gonna find this energy, and it's gonna just feel great. And I top decked that energy recycler, and I was like, yes, make it that much easier. Like, put those energies back, and let's get one. And then the very next turn after the energy recycler, I draw the water energy, and I'm like, yes. And I ended up getting there.
And yeah, there you go. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very, very much.
All right, so you covered a lot about your deck, but there's a lot of like I guess like techie supporter cards that really don't see too much in decks nowadays. What was your favorite one overall? Was it Stevens? Would that make everybody's day, or was it like Team Rocket's Handiwork? Maybe the Skull Grunt.
This guy right here. So, like I said a little bit earlier in the video, I have played Steven in a lot of decks this year. I know Israel Sosa's been a big fan of it, and when I first got back into the game this year, because for those that don't know, I've played the game basically since the beginning. I've been to Worlds 3 times, but I haven't played competitively for the last 5 or 6 years. I've been playing a lot of Magic. I just wasn't too big a fan of a lot of the formats over the last few years, and I didn't really like them, so I didn't play as much. I would play Nats every year, basically, but other than that, I didn't play all year. And I came back this year, and I looked through all the trainer cards, and I found Steven, and it reminded me of Castaway, an old supporter card that would get a basic energy and a supporter and a Pokemon tool, which would be insane in Lapras, but because I could never draw into my Fury Belts when I wanted. I always had to Skyla for them. So, but Steven was so important because I noted it in the back of my mind because I was like, any deck where whenever I build decks, I look for whatever the inherent weakness of the deck itself is, not so much matchups wise. Mm-hmm. And because there's always something. It's like if this deck doesn't do X by the second turn, then it's not going to get there most of the time, or something like that. And with Lapras specifically, I noticed that any game I kept a tally in testing where in this game I missed my first energy drop on X turn, and I noticed that the games where I didn't miss an energy drop, I didn't lose. Like, I didn't lose any game where I didn't miss an energy drop. And I had tested a lot with Hal or Tierno in the Lapras deck, which is another supporter that a lot of people overlook. But in Lapras, it's actually really good because you're able to like double collect. And I really, really liked having a draw card that didn't interact with my opponent, where I didn't feel like if they were drawing bad, I didn't want to end them with this deck especially, because everybody's been in that situation. But with this deck where you're trying to lock your opponent down and slow them down, like ending them into a better hand is never a good thing. But Steven was insane because it let you search out any of those supporters that messed up whatever your opponent was going to do on the next turn. And it also forced them to end you, which is super important because if you, Steven, for like the Rocket's Handiwork, or not Rocket's Handiwork, but Flare Grunt, and they aren't prepared to lose their energy the next turn, then they're going to be inclined to end you. Well, if they end me early game, they don't have those ends for late game when they need to use it to not mill out. And so that interaction was amazing for me, and just being able to like Steven for a water energy and another Steven to guarantee my energy drop on the next turn was amazing. And then if I needed an energy drop after that, the second Steven can get Skyla, which on the next turn can get Professor's Letter to get 2 more energy. So it's just kind of like I kept streaming my deck to where if I needed an energy, I had a supporter that could guarantee me one immediately, and if I don't need an energy, then I get to do something to disrupt their energy. And so Steven by far was amazing because, especially against Decidueye Vileplume, where you need Hex Maniac, being able to search out Hex Maniac, but it's like I had 4 Hex Maniacs in my deck without having 4 Hex Maniacs in my deck. So like it's like Hex Maniac said, "Oh, also you get an energy." Like, and so I was able to always have Hex when I needed it. Always have. That's why I was able to get away with only playing 1 Lysandre because I can just search it out whenever I'm going to need it for the next turn.
Mm-hmm.
And I versus Seekered for Steven more than I did for Flare Grunt in this tournament, which is amazing to me. So that card by far was the MVP.
All right. Now, would you make any? I know you won regionals, but I mean, would you make any changes to your list, or you think it's like 100% you play the same 60 again?
I was thinking about this on the way home. I really think that I'd love to find space for the Kukui. I don't know where that space comes from. It might be the second Skyla. Other than that, I don't know where else I would cut. I had thought about a floatstone as well. A lot of Lapras lists run a floatstone for the Wobbuffet, but there were several times in the tournament where it was super important that I put a Fury Belt on Wobbuffet as well. And I also had the mentality of I don't care if Wobbuffet's active because that means I'm not losing. Because they can never KO Wobbuffet to win the game because it's the only single prize Pokemon in my deck. Sure. So if he's active, they can't beat me, basically. So I just didn't feel the need for the Floatstone. And other than that, the only card that I would consider adding is Kukui. I don't know exactly what I would cut. It would probably have to be the second Skyla, which I don't know if I want to cut because it's so important at searching out Rough Seas and Enhanced Hammer that I don't think I could cut it. But other than that, I think that the list I would leave exactly the same.
Okay. Now, looking forward to Guardians Rising, I know a lot of people are already thinking about Lapras, and some people are converting the Lapras into like an Aqua Patch kind of version and not playing this Energy Denial. Would you just keep it more the Energy Denial, or would you switch over to like the more aggressive Lapras version?
I definitely would not play an Energy Denial version in the first weeks of Guardians Rising until, yeah, you can't really play a control deck like this until you pretty much know what the metagame is going to be. And especially with things like the new Garbodor, where it attacks for a single energy and blows up based on the number of items that you have. I play 45 trainer cards in this deck, so I'm not very confident against that card. So I don't think that, sadly, I don't think that this deck is viable going forward in its current iteration. There may be some kind of aggressive Lapras variant with Aqua Patch, like you were saying, where you're just able to like KO Garbodor after Garbodor and just get there anyway. Mm-hmm. But before I would play a control list of Lapras, I would definitely wait to see what the metagame has in store.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, looking forward to Guardians Rising. Is there any other like cards that really interest you? Like, are you like kind of looking at Sylveon because it's kind of like a Lapras, but you guaranteed the same cards, or you're like, oh, Lapras is one and done. I'm not gonna play a super control deck anymore.
I love Sylveon just because Eevee is my favorite Pokemon, and so I'd love for that deck to be good. I know a lot of people think that Sylveon is just like a better Lapras, but from what I've been able to notice, like Rough Seas is so important to the deck. And from my testing, like I think it's called Magical Ribbon is Sylveon's first attack, where you search the 3 cards instead of just draw 3. While those 2 attacks comparatively, like clearly searching your deck for any 3 cards is better than drawing 3 random cards. But other than that, I'm not sure how much I like the Sylveon version. It doesn't have the healing that Lapras does because while you can play things like Fairy Drop, but that's worse than a Rough Seas that sits in play and forces your opponent to play more cards. It evolves, and even though it's free evolution, it still takes up more slots in the deck.
Hmm.
So I think that if I were to try and play this style of deck again, I'd keep it Lapras. The something I thought about was you can play a Vaporeon in the Sylveon version to make your Sylveon be able to use Rough Seas. Um, but other than that, I'm not too sure. I'd have to do a lot of testing with it before I play that version over Lapras.
All right, so you talked about you got your World's Advice. Congratulations on that, sir.
Thank you.
How many points are you at exactly? Do you know?
I'm now at 623.
All right, and oh, you're good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm now at 623, and I'm not sure where that's going to fall in the like rankings after they post all the bumps and upload this tournament and everything. But yeah, at 623.
Now, are you gonna go to any more regionals after this, or is like nationals like the next stop?
No, I definitely am still going to regionals. I'm locked in for Wisconsin. I might fly out to Mexico City now. It's going to depend on if I think I can make a run for top 16 in rankings or not.
Sure.
If after this tournament uploads, I'm not even in the top 25, then I'm probably not going to make a run for it. But I'm still going to go to Wisconsin for sure, regardless. If I am in the top 25, I'm probably going to try and make a run for top 16. And I'll probably go to Seattle and Wisconsin and Mexico City and the Origin Special Event and Nationals.
Yeah, spend that $5 grand somehow, right?
Yep, and it's all going to go back into Pokemon one way or another. I want it playing Pokemon. I'll blow it playing Pokemon.
We gotta buy new stuff for Guardians Rising. Come on, Pokemon. Thank you.
We'll figure it out.
All right, man. Well, do you want to get a shout out to anybody before we head out here?
Shout out to my best buddy Alex Hamilton. He rooted me on all tournament and tried to. He was nervous about me choosing Lapras, but in his words, he was like, "You can top 32 with anything, so you might as well play Lapras." And my friend Jacob Cottle, who this was his first tournament, but I've known him for years and years, and he's trying to get into the game. So he was my good luck charm since he was the thing that changed for this one. And other than that, all my friends that rooted me on, I've had so many people reach out to me and everything, and it means so much. To my mom and dad for driving me to all these tournaments over the years before I could drive, and to everybody who's ever said anything kind about me or congratulated me on anything. It's a huge shout out to you.
All right, man. Well, thank you one more time for doing the interview. I really do appreciate it. And congratulations. Hopefully, you get that top 25 and you go for that crazy top 16 run.
Definitely. I'm ready. Like, I'm pumped. I really want to be in that top 25 where I want to be. And I've got some, like, flights saved in my queue, like, ready to just click on them. If I think I can make a run for it, I'm going to do nothing but play Pokemon for, like, the next 7 weekends.
That sounds good to me, man. Well, good luck. Hopefully, it becomes dreams come true. And if you make another top 8, we'll do another video. Keep on going.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you so much for having me on and everything.
All right, man. Well, thank you for doing the video. Good luck at your future tournaments, and I'll see you at Nationals for sure. But, guys, hopefully during this video, you learned something new about Lapras and maybe have a little more faith in it like I did. Going into this weekend, I'm glad somebody like James did play it, and that makes me excited for sure. But, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Have a fantastic day. Alrighty. Bye. How was that? Alright, guys, I just want to give a quick shout out to our 3 sponsors, 60 Cards, Yeti Gaming, and the Pokemon Company International. Links to everything will be down below in the description. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Alrighty.